The only other sound was the hum of the engine as Dee broke the silence. Have you been listening to any good music lately? I've been meaning to get some new tunes for these road trips. Dee was speaking to me, but to be honest, I was hardly listening. Packing up earlier that morning had re-sparked the excitement I had for going on this climbing trip. It was hard to believe that in 10 short hours, we'd be in Kentucky's Red River Gorge. Sorry, what was that? I stammered as I tried to break out of my daydream. The other members of our group were doing some dreaming of their own as they slept in the back of the bus, leaving Dee and I time to catch up. Dee smiled, scratched his head with the brim of his signature outdoor hat, and then readjusted it to block the morning sun. I was seeing if you knew of any good music, Dee restated. Oh, have you heard of All J? I asked. Or Bon Iver? What about Man Man? I knew there was little to no chance that a 40-something-year-old father of twin toddlers teaching at a Christian high school would have any idea who these groups were. But Dee was able to surprise you from time to time. Dee, or when he's in the classroom, Mr. Dominguez, was one of my favorite teachers at Wheaton Academy. His demeanor and attitude seemed to be represented through his colorfully decorated classroom. Everything from the ivy he watered daily that grew along the borders of the ceilings to the thrones he had in place of chairs for his students to sit in. Every treasure and knick-knack that filled his numerous shelves and tables seemed to be as odd and as interesting as he was himself. Not only did he have some of the most enjoyable and unusual lessons that may or may not have incorporated fencing from time to time, but he seemed to be one of the teachers that was truthfully concerned with how the students' lives were going outside of the classroom. He was a busy man to say the least, though, so it wasn't very surprising when he asked my brother Joel and I to help on the upcoming Kentucky trip. I think I may know Bon Iver. Here, use the iPad and buy some music, Dee said. Unfortunately, we were never able to download any music. This meant we were stuck listening to YouTube. Dee suggested that I pick some routes out from the guidebook, so I spent the next 10 hours combing through the book carefully to find the perfect climbs. My brother Joel and I had always gotten along, but when we went to the new school together, we became close friends. He had found out about a climbing club that Dee ran, and together we were able to bond over the new activity. Both of us had gone through the same training and spent hours after hours in the gym. It was to the point where Joel and I were able to read each other's minds while climbing. I trusted him wholeheartedly. The next day while at the Red, initially all the parking areas were completely filled. My stomach churned and knotted as we drove. It had been my responsibility during this climbing trip to find out where we were going to go, and right now I wasn't being very helpful. However, with a little luck, our group was able to stumble upon an area in a shaded valley where we decided to unpack. As our car was parked, each group member grabbed gear and started walking up the path. The cool spring air was still wet as we walked through the dewy grass. The near-naked trees exposed a view of the path that traced the contours of the neighboring stream. With every inhale of clean Kentucky air, it seemed to undo the knots that had formed in my stomach. The sun began to warm our skin as we hiked along the trail. Today was going to be beautiful. A short 10-minute hike through the winding trail led our group to an opening where we met with an ancient cliff face with many available climbs. It wasn't before long I had found a harder route and asked Joel to come belay me. Climbing? I asked as I looked over my shoulder to see if Joel were ready. Climb on, he responded. He was holding both his hands out, ready to protect my head if I were to fall before making the first clip. My calloused hands were able to find homes within the breaks in the wall. The first couple of moves were comfortable, yet high intensity because the rope was not secured yet. In the climbing world, this means you're not on belay, a term used to describe the person who's controlling the slack in the rope. As I moved into reaching distance of the first clip, my heart began to beat faster. I tried to calm my body and get my body into the position to take a lot of the weight off my arms in order to make my first clip. I unhooked the carabiner from my harness and connected it to the nut. a piece of hardware that's permanently placed into the routes for sport climbing. I grabbed the rope and attached it to the carabiner. My first clip was complete. "On belay," Joel said as he lowered his hands and started belaying the rope. The belayer is the person who's controlling how much slack is in the rope. Too much slack, and the climber will not be safe and may hit the ground if they fall. Not enough slack, and the climber won't be able to move up the wall, and that can be just as dangerous. The belayer has to be aware of what's going on at all times, without even being told. This is one of the reasons why Joel and I were such a good team. Being on belay, I felt more secure. Before long, I was at the 5th clip, around 50 feet in the air. The climb had been more difficult than I anticipated. As I attempted to secure the 5th clip, I felt uneasy, and I yelled down to Joel that I was going to be falling. He prepared himself by pulling the extra slack from the rope. The feeling that usually comes from a roller coaster was something I was never able to get used to when falling outdoors while climbing. The same was true for this climb. I ended up stopping in between the 3rd and the 4th clip on this fall. I was feeling tired, but I had confidence that I'd be able to make it up the wall. I rested, trying to work the blood back into what was now concrete forearms and stretching my fingers out to get more grip into them before reattempting this climb. I retraced my earlier moves as I moved up the wall, all the while envisioning how I'd get past the crux, a term used to describe the hardest part of the wall. Suddenly, I was right back at the 5th clip, and I had an idea. I'd go ahead and pull extra slack into the rope so that I could move my hand up to the clip unhindered. That way I'd spend less time holding onto the small hold and hopefully not fall. As I stood against the wall, trying to hold on best I could, I began using my mouth to help pull the slack into the rope as quickly as possible. I had a good amount of slack collected. Carefully, I raised my right hand to guide the rope to the mouth of the clip. Just as I thought I had done it successfully, my left hand popped off the wall and I began to fall. "Shoot!" I yelled as I began my rapid descent. Even a great belayer like Joel was not able to pull in the extra slack that I had been collecting moments ago. I was in for a long fall. The 4th clip disappeared and I zipped past the 3rd clip. As I got closer to the ground, I started to come to the realization that I would hit it. The 2nd clip was a blur as it passed on me on my way to the ground. Just then, I felt a little resistance in the rope. But would it be enough to slow me down fast enough? I watched as my feet began to make contact with the ground in almost slow motion. I began to bend my legs, preparing to roll like they do in the army to avoid hurting themselves, or so I heard. Suddenly, the rope took all my weight before I began my roll. I stood up, uninjured, and in complete disbelief. I had just taken a 5-story fall in Kentucky without receiving even a sprained ankle. Joel's face, I'm sure, reflected what was on my own. A mixture of emotions, complete shock, and absolute relief. After seeing such a close call. Though there are many memories about that Kentucky trip, having my little brother save my life will always be one that I'll never forget.